Hey, what's going on, folks? You locked in live with Algernon Cash right here on WTOB. This is the inaugural episode of Locked in Live with Algernon Cash, and I appreciate you all for joining us. Every week, we will be recording this show right here on Facebook Live. You can leave your questions or your comments. You can tell me how crazy I am right in the comment section, and if I get around to it, I'll be sure to read your question to our guest. Also, this show will broadcast every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. on WTOB. So you can also listen there and invite your friends to listen and join us for this conversation. So for anyone that knows me, they know for the past 20 years, I've been involved with politics and a variety of initiatives all around the community. You oftentimes see me talk about what it means to be locked in. And for a lot of you, I'll get questions and I get messages and you ask me, what does it mean to be locked in? So what it means to be locked in, it means to be laser focused on those things in your life that's going to transform your life, improve your life, and allow you to achieve your goals. So every single week, I'm going to be talking about the news. I'm going to be talking about politics. I'm going to talk about business, but I'm also going to be bringing you some really cool insight on what you can do to be able to start achieving your goals and transforming your life. But the biggest thing is when you watch the news with me, you also get my commentary. And so you may not always like what I'm going to say, but you know that I'm always going to tell you the truth. So every week here, I want you to meet me here to lock in live, okay? Make sure you're with me. So this week, I've got a special guest. Now, over the last 20 years, like I said, I've been involved in a lot of different initiatives. One thing that has been able to happen for me in life is I've built a lot of great relationships. And I'm going to be calling on some of my closest friends to join me every single week to share a lot of insight about what it is that they do, not only here in our own backyard, but perhaps right around the state and all around the country. And so this week, I've got a special guest. I've got North Carolina House Majority Whip John Hardister is in the room with me. And John and I are going to talk a little bit about what's going on with state politics here in North Carolina. The legislative session just recessed until September. So we're going to get an update on everything that they were able to achieve this past session. And of course, once again, this is a great opportunity. If you've got questions for John, questions for me, or just questions in general about what's going on with state politics, this is a great opportunity to ask some of those questions. Representative, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, Algernon. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. It feels like every time I call on you, you answer. And so I really, really appreciate that. And I appreciate you joining me for the inaugural episode of Locked in Live with Algernon Cash. You know, I had a good friend tell me many years ago that I should get into radio. And I think I've been avoiding it and fighting and running from it. But finally, they wrestled me down and convinced me to do this. And I know when I first met you, you were sort of trying to get into politics. And I think you had several folks around you saying you needed to get into politics. So one of the first things I want to start off with is talk to the people a little bit about why you even got involved in politics. Why did you want to be in the North Carolina General Assembly?
Yes, so Algernon, it dates back to about 10 years ago when I first ran for office in 2010. I think that's actually when you and I first met. The main reason I ran is because of the economy. The Great Recession, my family works in real estate. We have a mortgage company. The recession of 2008 that carried over for a few years had a detrimental impact on my family's business and lots of families all over the state of North Carolina. So I decided to run. Some people talked to me about it, kind of like you said, some folks wanted you to get in the radio. Well, I had kind of a similar experience. And I didn't win the first time in 2010, but I kind of enjoyed the process of being a candidate, getting out, talking to people, learning about them, learning about their concerns and their background. And so ran again in 2012 and got elected. I'm currently in a fourth term, and it's been a interesting experience so far.
Well, you know, one thing that I noticed, I follow you on Facebook, and you've got really great constituent services. You're always trying to inform people about what's going on in Raleigh. But you got some fans too on Facebook, as I like to call them. You got some folks that I guess for lack of better words, they like to come after you. And I've also had that same sentiment. I've got a big fan club on Facebook as well, John, and sometimes when I say things, they like to come after me. Talk a little bit about, one thing that I've noticed is that it appears that you've got really tough skin. Talk a little bit about how it feels. I mean, you're in Raleigh, you're serving the people, you're working on these issues, but sometimes people don't always see it that way. How does that make you feel?
Well, it really comes to the territory. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, you're going to get a variety of feedback, some positive, some negative. It really just comes with the territory, especially in today's day and age of social media. People have different ways of communicate now. In fact, we have very enhanced ways of communication. So it's really a good thing, I think, even though it sometimes can be toxic on social media. It really helps you to stay informed as to how people feel about various topics. But you do have to have thick skin because, it's not a popularity contest. We have to make very difficult decisions. Some issues are polarizing. People are passionate about it. So you do have to have thick skin, but you also have to focus on doing what you think is right, being able to justify your decisions. Ultimately, I would say that if you're sincere and if you explain yourself, 9 out of 10 times, I think you're likely to have productive dialogue, and most people will respect you even if they don't agree.
No, I agree with you, and I like how you're using the word focus, because when when I talk about being locked in, that's a lot of what I mean. It's just being able to stay so focused on what it is you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, what you're trying to do in your life, the service that you're trying to provide to people. And if you just focus and you lock in on whatever that is, and some kind of way turn off all the outside noise, you can really make great strides and achieve really big goals. So I really love that word focus. For some people, I'm a political junkie, so I like to believe that I know a lot about what goes on the General Assembly. For some people, they hear your title, North Carolina House Majority Whip, and you're the second most powerful person in the North Carolina House. Am I correct?
Probably maybe the fourth or fifth.
Fourth, okay. So talk to the listeners about a little bit about what does the House Majority Whip do, and how did you go about getting that position?
Yeah, so this question comes up a lot. The Majority Whip doesn't really it's not as ominous as the name makes it sound. Most of what we do is attendance. We count votes if there's an important vote coming up. Like if we're voting on the budget or something like that. I need to make sure the members know the schedule, that they know which days to be in Raleigh, what time to be in session. And then we count votes. We don't tell people how to vote. Obviously, members are elected on their own. They get to make their own decision. It's not like we're twisting people's arms trying to get them to vote a certain way. But pretty often before you take a bill to the floor, you want to know the vote count on it. And you build consensus. If there's a section of a bill that some folks don't like, what I can do is put them in touch with the bill sponsor and they could work it out. So again, it's tracking the schedule, counting votes, and trying to build consensus within, the members who serve in the House.
So it sounds like it's more of the actual tactical objectives of what goes on in the House, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes, I would say that's correct.
Good. Well, I know you all just, I think y'all adjourned this past Thursday. You just adjourned the House until September. I know this was sort of a very up and down session as you've been dealing with a lot of the COVID-19 relief measures. Just give the listeners maybe a brief update on, what you felt like you were able to achieve this past legislative session.
Yeah, so and just to give a little bit of background on our schedule, a lot of people think that we're full-time, and we're technically not, even though it's becoming more of a full-time job. We don't make much money. Our salary is about $13,900 a year. We do get a per diem when we're in session to help us pay for expenses, but it's technically not a full-time job. The way it works is every odd year, like 2019, 2021, we have a longer session, starts in January, and we'll usually try to adjourn around July when the fiscal year starts, July 1st. And then every even year, like this year, 2020, we all have to stand for re-election. That includes the House and the Senate. And we have what's called a short session, which usually begins in May, and we try to finish up in July. But Algernon, we're always on call. It's kind of like a medical doctor and how they're always on call. You can always go back in. It's kind of the same way with us. We can get called in at any time if there's an emergency. This year, we've done a lot of work. A lot of it relates to COVID-19. We received about $3 billion in funding from the federal government for COVID-19 relief, and we've spent now about $2 billion of those dollars for COVID-19, and that relates to a lot of different areas. Some of it is going to COVID-19 testing, tracing, hospital operations. We put quite a bit of funding into a program for small business. We're facing a budget deficit of about $4 billion. And just to give you perspective, our state operating budget is about $22 billion. The good news is, Algernon, we've been, I would say, fiscally responsible over the last few years, and we've saved a surplus of over $2 billion in state money, and that's kind of given us a bit of a cushion where we're not having to cut, any core services. We're not having to cut salaries of teachers or anything like that. We did see that occur about 10 years ago, where when we had the Great Recession, there were some cuts made, to core services and teacher pay. But fortunately, we're not in that situation now. The economy has been affected, but we're seeing some signs of life, out there in the economy. Some other things that we worked on, I have to give you a special shout out, Algernon. The idea to delay ABC permit renewal fees for, businesses that have to have an ABC permit. A lot of those would be bars that have been forced to close due to the executive orders. A lot of those folks are having a tough time financially. ABC permits are not cheap in many cases, and this allows them to, delay the renewal. The way it works is it would be 90 days at the time in which they are authorized to reopen. And if they've already paid the fee, they can actually get a refund, a temporary refund, because, as you know very well, it costs money sometimes to get a business back open and running, especially when you have to comply with social distancing and special equipment and sanitation equipment and things like that. So I'm proud that we got that done. It passed the House and Senate unanimously, sitting on the governor's desk now. I'm hearing that he's going to sign it. Another thing that's kind of interesting I'd like to throw out there is there was a law dating back to 1950s that made it illegal to wear a mask in public for safety reasons. Well, we temporarily suspended that law a few months ago due to the pandemic so people could wear a mask. And of course, the governor has issued now a statewide mandate to wear a mask. But that extension of the suspension on the law was set to expire in August, which means that technically in August it would be illegal to wear a mask, and we didn't think that would be a good scenario. So what we did is we actually amended that law so that if there's a public health emergency like COVID-19, that doesn't apply. Anyone could wear a mask. There's a lot of debate about whether or not people should wear a mask, but personally, I think it's a good idea. You can argue the merits of a mandate, but I think people should at least have the choice. So those are just a few things that we've been working on. But like I said, I got to give you a shout out, and a lot of folks out there, all over Guilford County, North Carolina. You've provided us with very good feedback, and it's helped us do our job.
Well, if you want to just go ahead and take about 10% of that 13,900, I'll give you my address offline, and you can drop a check in the mail. But now I'm glad that you mentioned the fact of what you guys earn in terms of compensation, because I do think a lot of people believe that you're full time and you're there all the time and you're getting rich off being in politics, and a lot of people think that and mistakenly think that. If you're just now joining us, you're locked in live with Algernon Cash every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. WTOB. This show will broadcast. I'm obviously your host, Algernon Cash. My special guest today is North Carolina House Majority Whip John Hardister. He's joining us and just providing us a little bit of an update on what's going on with statewide politics here in North Carolina. If you have a question or you have a comment or a statement, you can leave it in the comment section, and I'll certainly work around to it. John, a lot of times, and I know you and I, we talk frequently, and we always talk a lot about business and, the impact that I think COVID-19 has had on businesses. Can you name or talk about anything that you feel like y'all have done in this past legislative session or this current legislative session that is more directed at families and individuals?
Yeah, there's a few things we've done. And by the way, if my bookshelves look empty back here, Algernon, it's because I'm moving.
Okay.
I just
you do read. Okay.
Yeah, so I put a couple things on here so it wouldn't look too empty back there. But that's in case your viewers are wondering, why does he have empty bookshelves? But good question. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a tough time for families out there, especially those who are elderly, that are more susceptible to COVID-19. We put tens of millions of dollars into testing for COVID-19, which has been very successful so far. We're seeing a very substantial increase amount of testing that's being done for COVID-19 and hospital operations, as well as contact tracing. And that's where if somebody is COVID positive, they can contact the folks at DHHS, who then can get on the phone and help you contact the people you may have come into contact with, to help them determine whether or not they need to be in isolation. Another thing that I would mention, and this is a really big deal, is we finally got Medicaid transformation done. And that's not the same thing as expansion, but we're changing our Medicaid system from a fee-for-service system to one that's based on patient care, which is called managed care. And that means these block grants are going to go out to all the provider networks across the state, and they're going to get a block grant where they can use that money to take care of the patient, and any surplus money they have left over, they can keep as a profit. So it kind of creates more of an incentive, and the providers are in favor of it. I think it's going to produce better patient outcomes. And I think that's really going to help a lot of those families that, may have someone in their family who's disabled. A lot of children are in Medicaid. So that's something I'm really proud that we were able to get done. But beyond that, I think the executive orders, we can debate sometimes the merits of the executive orders, but, the shutdown has been hard, but I think it was necessary, for a period of time. And I'm one of those who now believes we need to start the process of reopening. We got to be smart about it. We can debate the specifics and the timing, but I do think that the initial shutdown and some of the things that were done to close businesses, to put social distancing in place, I think it was necessary to protect families. I just think now we're at the time where we need to be maybe a little bit expeditious about the process of trying to reopen. It's going to be hard, Algernon, but there's no good solution either way. There's side effects either way you go. If you keep things shut down for too long, you're going to have all these economic ramifications. You're going to have an escalation in violence and mental health issues and suicide. And unfortunately, we're already seeing some of that. But then you don't want to be cavalier about the virus because it can be very dangerous. So it's been tough on families out there. I don't know if there's a perfect solution, but I think we're doing the best we can.
No, I agree with you. I think the governor is certainly responding as best as he knows how, and I know that there are many of us that may second guess some of the decisions that have been made. But I certainly can't imagine being in his job right now, and I'm sure it's very tough to make some of these decisions that have been made. In regards, you brought up COVID-19 testing, and in regards to testing, I've read several news reports that talk about how there's an 8 to sometimes 10-day turnaround for you to get test results back. Some of the dollars that you all have provided to expand testing, do you think it'll bring that turnaround time down? And I ask that because if it takes 8 to 10 days for me to get my test back, well, how many people have I interacted with in that 8 to 10 days before I even learned that maybe I am positive? So will those additional dollars allow for quicker turnaround time on testing, or?
I think so, but there's really no clear answer on that right now because there's a confluence of factors that go into testing. Part of it is more people are getting tested now, and DHHS has changed the protocols where it used to be basically the only way you could get tested is if you were symptomatic. Or even then, there were some people symptomatic that they wouldn't test. If you're young and healthy and don't have a pre-existing condition, elderly people, they would pretty much allow to get tested. But now the DHHS has changed the protocols. More people are coming in to get tested, which is a good thing. But there's a lot of different supplies that go into the testing process. You've got the protective equipment for the doctors. And then even if the dollars are there, Algernon, to purchase the equipment, can they get it? They got to order it from somewhere, around the country or across the world. They got to bring it in. And then what's the shipment time? Then personnel, making sure that hospital personnel are healthy, because if they're screened, if they're COVID positive, they got to stay home. So a lot of factors are going into that, but I can also answer with a personal story. So I came into contact with someone a couple of weeks ago who subsequently tested positive for COVID. There was a lobbyist who works at the General Assembly who was COVID positive. So I got tested, and I was told initially it's going to be about a 2 to 4 day turnaround time. Well, it ended up being 7 days. And I'm a state legislator, so I don't get any kind of special treatment, nor should I. But to your point, it's really hard for folks to, kind of sit around and wait. But what I did is I stayed home a little bit more than normal. I wore a mask practically everywhere I went. I was never symptomatic, and I was not around this individual extensively. And a couple of my friends who were around this person more than me tested negative. So I felt pretty confident that I was negative, which I was. But that's a good question. We're working on it. The money's there, but very well, the way it works is even if you got the money, it doesn't mean you're going to get all the equipment as quickly as you want to.
Well, and you talk about how obviously certain businesses are still shut down, whether it be gyms, fitness facilities, skating rinks, bars. Schools are still really uncertain right now. We've not received any clear indication from the governor on whether or not when he's going to reopen schools. And I've got a question online from Mustafa Shabazz, and it says, in regards to the proposed opening of schools, has there been an allocation of additional funds to the counties to deal with the additional expenses that will be needed to meet safety concerns? And I know for a fact right here in Forsyth County, I've been talking with school board chair Malashay Woodbury, and they are projecting anywhere from $35 million to $45 million in additional resources needed, or additional funds needed, to be able to deal with the safety concerns of allowing students to come back to school. What is the General Assembly doing in regards to mobilizing additional dollars to our school districts?
That is a great question, and a very important question, actually. So, I mentioned before, we got all this federal money. We probably have about $1 billion left over, and there could be more federal money coming. I've reached out to members of Congress, talked to them about, schools reopening. If you're going to spend any more federal dollars, this is probably a good place to spend it on. So we will go back into session in September, and we might even be called back before then. Like I said, we're kind of like a medical doctor. You're always on call. We could go back at any time. There has been some funding allocated for that purpose, but we're going to have to allocate more, I'm afraid. The issue is there's really no clear plan at this time. The governor has laid out basically 3 different options on what the schools could look like. Option A is that students go back to school with minimal social distancing, somewhat similar to normal circumstances. Option B is that there's kids who go back to school, but there would be social distancing, maybe reduced hours, and a lot less activities, things like that. And then option C is students don't go back to school at all. They stay home, and that's challenging because, as you know, not all kids have access to internet and computers and tablets and things like that. So we kind of need to get a sense of where we're going and what kind of protocols we're going to have to put in place for schools before we determine exactly how much money we need and how do we divvy it up and that kind of thing. Very complicated topic because it looks like that children are less susceptible to the virus. They're less likely to get it. If they do get it, thank God they're less likely to become ill. They're apparently not as likely to spread it if they're asymptomatic because then your viral load is low. But there are some kids who could be in danger if they get the virus, and there are some kids who have health problems. Then you got the teachers. A lot of teachers are younger, but some of them are older. Some of them have a health problem. But I can tell you, I think a lot of people I've heard from, they really want kids to go back to school, and it's understandable. You need to have that social interaction. A lot of parents count on school to kind of function as a daycare for their students. A lot of working class families count on their kids to go to school during the day. But as you said, I don't envy the governor's position. He's got a tough decision to make, but it is going to cost money. It's just we kind of need to have a clear and tangible direction as to where we're going, and then try to get the money out as quickly as we can.
Well, I think you highlighted an interesting point. I mean, there's a lot of working families that, and it's unfortunate. They do see school as a place to send their kids off for the day so that they can go work and take care of the things that they need to take care of. And I know from just talking to many of my friends, I've got a good friend of mine, and she felt like she just, she didn't just help her son complete the third grade. She said we completed the third grade together. I mean, that's how difficult it was. But you also, when this entire shutdown started, you also had a number of parents that unfortunately were laid off or lost their job, and so they were able to be home, with their child and homeschool them and help them get through the material. Well, a lot of that's changing. A lot of these parents are going back to work, or they've already went back to work. And let's say we continue to keep schools shut down. I mean, what do we say to those parents that really do have to be at work every day and not able to homeschool their kids?
There's no easy answer for that. Unfortunately, I've thought about it, and we've had discussions about that. But there are some people who can work from home, if their job allows them to do that. But some simply can't. If you work in some form of manufacturing, or you have some kind of job requires you to be in an office, or you work at a restaurant or retail or something like that, you can't work from home. You literally have to go into work. So if the kids are at home, there are some families that may have, aunts and uncles, or, someone in the family who can help watch the kids during the day if the kids are too young to stay at home by themselves, but not everyone has that luxury. So I don't know. I mean, we've looked at, daycare options and providing parents with funding to, place their child in daycare. But again, that's a separate set of funding that would cost a whole lot of money. So I think ideally we want kids to go back to school, and everyone said that. Everyone from the president to Governor Cooper, Republicans and Democrats, we just want to do it the safest way possible. So hopefully we can come up with a comprehensive plan to allow that to happen.
Well, again, I think we've got ourselves in a really interesting conundrum. And, for all the listeners that are out there and those that are watching through Facebook Live, I hope that we all have gained a new appreciation for the school system and our teachers and our educators and those folks that are responsible for making sure our kids get educated. And we do need to figure out a way to mobilize those resources to the right place. I'm always on record saying, and folks know I'm not a big sports fan, but I'm always on record saying if we can pay a gentleman $20 million a year because he can throw a pigskin 30 yards down a field, then certainly as a society and as a country, we need to figure out how to pay our teachers more money. We need to figure out how to make sure we fund our education system, because education is so critical. I know for someone like me who grew up really, really poor and on the wrong side of town, as some would say, it's education and access to education and access to information that allowed someone like me to be able to bridge the gap and to be able to compete. And so it's so critical that we don't forget those students and those kids that are most vulnerable right now to what's going on. And I think you hit on it when you talked about, not everyone has hotspots and, notebook computers. I mean, there's literally a digital divide right now that exists. And I think COVID-19 has certainly placed a light and an emphasis on that. So if you're listening online, if you're watching us now on Facebook Live, you are listening to North Carolina House Majority Whip John Hardister, and we're just talking a little bit about what's going on statewide with the variety of initiatives and public policy issues that the General Assembly has been looking at in this latest session. John, we're running out of time here. I probably only got about a minute or two. Real quick, can you give our listeners an idea of what they can expect to see in September? What's on the agenda?
At this point, there's no way to know for sure what exactly is going to be on the agenda because circumstances are changing every day. But obviously, COVID-19 funding for schools. There could be additional relief related to COVID-19 for small businesses, a variety of issues we could look at. One, you and I talked about, Algernon, was some form of legal protection for businesses for liability. That's something that, we've talked about. Haven't quite got that across the finish line yet, but that's something we could look at in September. Anything we can do to help keep families safe, to get the economy going, strike that balance between protecting the economy and protecting folks from the virus. I think that'll continue to be our focus. And as always, we're always open for ideas. If you or any your listeners have ideas, you're welcome to reach out to us anytime.
And how would they get in touch with you, John? And be careful now. I've got some passionate listeners and some passionate fans, so they'll follow up with you. But how can they get in touch with you?
So it's very easy. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, John Hardister, and my email is johnhardister@gmail.com. And just do a Google search, and all the information comes up. And you can practically do that for every member who serves in General Assembly. And that's the good thing about the North Carolina General Assembly is the state legislatures are close to the people we represent, whereas it's a little bit harder to get in touch with your members of Congress or your U.S. Senator. But those of us who serve at state level, we're literally your neighbor next door. We're not far away, and we're always happy to have a conversation.
Well, John, I appreciate this. I appreciate this conversation, and I appreciate everyone who's been listening. You've been listening to North Carolina House Majority Whip John Hardister providing a statewide update on a variety of legislative issues. This is the inaugural episode of Locked In Live, and I am your host, Algernon Cash. You can tune in every Sunday morning right here on WTOB at 8 a.m. You can also join us on Facebook Live, and we'll be doing this every single week. Y'all stay locked in. All right, John, you still there?